Amen. Okay, so Proverbs 22, it starts, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold. So, and as we go through each one of these proverbs, there's going to just be some short comments that I'll make about each one. But this is a great way to start because it talks about our reputation and what we should value in our lives. Really comes down to having a good name, and specifically a good name in light of the Lord himself. Because if we say various names, we can have various reactions to that. And I can list some names here shortly, but as we go through names, then sometimes a good name is in reference to what we regard as good. So just starting out at the top, though, a good name is to be chosen. It's something that we choose and we desire and sort of lock into. And that's something that we should choose over great riches, and that we should love favor rather than silver and gold. And in a easy way, or encapsulated way, we could just say, don't sell out your integrity for riches, for money, and so on. And there may be times when, I mean, we see this in politics all the time. People are going after the riches, and they're selling themselves out, and they'll try to have to cover it up, but they're selling themselves out. But this can happen with all of us. There could be times when, even with our job, we're pining over more of a wage and getting that increase and getting more money and bouncing from company to company. And when you look at a person's life, there's going to be, there might be people that are enemies, but when you look at a person's life, it sort of comes down to what the reputation is. And we might actually be afraid to ask other people what our reputation is. Like, what's our name like in their eyes? And we know that in the book of Revelation that we'll all receive a name. And I think that name will be our reputation in God's sight. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but just even comparing names, that as you reference names, some people would say, yes, that's a good name, and others would say, no, that's a bad name. And to pursue things after riches is wrong. We're going to learn next week that riches in and of itself are uncertain. The things that we can trust in could be gone. So anyway, so that said, we want the right name. Now, I thought, well, okay, let me go through some comparative names here. So it would bring a reaction for us. So the Apostle Peter, and then the Apostle Paul, and then you have the Apostle Judas. And those have different names associated with them, or different attributes associated with them. Peter has one we all kind of can go through and think, in the end, he finished well, and he made some mistakes, but he was on fire for the Lord. Paul, persecuted, but then, he was a man of vast knowledge, and he was a defender of the faith, and was sound in his doctrine. And then you have Judas, who literally, this is a guy that sold out for silver, and he thought maybe he was doing, this is presumptive, but he thought perhaps that he was doing God a favor by selling out Jesus so that he can sort of push the agenda of the Messiah. But he ended up being a traitor and a betrayer. And then you have other names that can come in. So, of course, you have Billy Graham. And what sort of name does that elicit? What do we think of when we think of him? And then you can think of Hitler. Now, for Christians, we would all say, yeah, Billy Graham is right on. But there are other people in the world who say, hey, I'm not into Billy Graham. In fact, that's not a good name. Likewise, or conversely, we would generally say Hitler was a bad name or a bad person and what's associated with him. But there were people definitely in the 30s that were pro-Hitler and still are today. And so really it comes down to, even politically, Trump, Biden, looking at these names and what how you respond to them really comes down to what side of good you're on, or what your definition of good is. And so our endeavor, or what we should be choosing, is not only to choose that thing which is a good name or a good reputation, but that which is good in the sight of God. Because there's a relativism in this world as far as what's good, instead of us choosing the way, the truth, and the life, and knowing that he's good, and we want to be on that side and let that bring our definition. So that's a lot about verse 1, but again, it's a good way to start. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold. The rich and the poor have this in common: the Lord's the maker of them all. So this really emphasizes what we know, that God's not partial to people. In fact, we know, well, what Jesus said. It's from Matthew 5:45. Your Father in heaven, he makes the sun set on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. That God is doing good things for good people and bad people, on just people and on unjust people, on rich people, on poor people, and so on. And for us to understand that he's not willing that any would perish, all to come to repentance, it's not dependent upon who we are in the sense of whether we're good people or bad people. It just comes down to him bringing those blessings, not showing the partiality. But the rich and the poor, they have this in common: the Lord's the maker of them all. Now that's the starting point. He's the maker of us, but that doesn't mean that he's necessarily the heavenly Father for everyone. You remember what Jesus talked about. He said he was calling the Pharisees brood of vipers, sons of the devil, or sons of snakes. That until we are born again, we're sons of Satan. We're all made by God, but who our Father is vastly different and dependent upon the decision that we've made in our life toward him and the trust that we have in Jesus Christ. So again, the rich and the poor have this in common. So this really, what it does is it emphasizes that there really isn't a place for condescension on either part, especially the rich toward the poor, that God sees that as impartial. Then we get to verse 3: a prudent man foresees evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. So the prudent man, this really has to do with the idea of being thoughtful and careful about the future. I mean, an insurance company is called Prudential, and they ride on the fact of being careful and ready and putting your trust in them, because if you have some calamity, if there's a tornado and it rips your roof off or rips your whole house down, you have insurance. And so there's insurance policies, there's all sorts of things that we can do ourselves. We're in a world right now that is into this prepping mindset that says I need to hoard up guns and food and have something that's fortified and so on. And a lot of people take this verse, the idea of prudence, and they take that to mean that they need to do a bunch of things in and of themselves in order to offset calamity. But I believe that it's deeper than that. A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself. The simple, of course, pass on and are punished. So the simple, they don't do anything. The prudent man does something about it. But the question is what is it that we're hiding ourselves in? And that brings me to, well, first of all, the verse that Tim mentioned, Psalm 91, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. So I don't think there's any coincidence that Tim gave this out in our prayer time earlier and emphasized that, and that ties into the idea of a prudent man. That what are we hiding ourselves in? The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. That our prudence isn't in our own ability to take care of our own needs. That it all comes down to God. It relates to any kind of evil, but really I think this goes even further into what the ultimate is, in that there is a bad end to those who are not walking with the Lord, and it's hell and separation from God for all eternity. Now, a prudent man sees that, and he hides himself in the name of the Lord. The prudent man sees that, and he dwells in the secret place of the Most High. That he acknowledges that I am a sinner, and this is going to be my end. I'm not simple-minded, but you think it through, you take consideration, and you make the right choice having to do with where you need to hide. When you're talking about eternal things, there's only one place to hide, and it's to hide in the Lord Jesus Christ. But you're safe there. And really, that carries over into any kind of evil. We've had concern about riots, there's concern about weather, there's concern about all sorts of things that can happen. There's concern about relationships falling apart, that how do we hold on to these? How do we keep ourselves from being ripped off? I've been hearing about title deed insurance. There's so many different types of insurances that we can be afraid of. And it's not that insurances are bad, but we need to remember that our faith and our hope needs to be found hidden in Jesus Christ. It's the bottom line. So, moving on. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor of life. So, humility and fear versus what? What's the opposite of that? Arrogance and self-sufficiency. So, riches, honor, and life come as a result of humility and fear. So, if we're ever concerned, how can I attain these things? How can I grab hold of these things which are, riches and honor and life? It starts with humility instead of arrogance. It starts with the fear of the Lord instead of self-sufficiency, faith in yourself, faith in what you can do. It all goes back to the Lord. And then as we do that, then we begin to see that, the riches aspect, that's only necessary as I'm generous with regard to what God's given to me with those riches. In other words, where you become a conduit, and we'll get to this later with a couple other verses, but it becomes a conduit. And the whole idea of honor, why is that important? So that we can share the gospel and we have the credibility with regard to sharing the gospel because we're honorable people. And then lastly, life, that, just as if we're going to have this humility and fear of the Lord, then it's going to result in life, and that's going to be something that will be contagious and other people will be drawn to it. Verse 5, thorns and snares are the way of the perverse. He who guards his soul will be far from them. So the idea of this word perverse, the King James actually says froward, which isn't necessarily backward, but it means froward, moving forward in a crooked way or in a contrary way. And in a way, so if that's the right way, then you sort of go contrary to what that answer is. It might be backward, but it could just be anything that's not straightforward. And here it says, thorns and snares are the way of the perverse. So you ever had or heard someone say, man, life is horrible and things are just getting worse every day. It's just going down. I think what we need to do is see that if there's thorns, like things that are trying to, that are obstacles to us, that are painful, and snares, things that we're getting caught up in, if that's what's going on in our lives, if we've got that sort of difficulty in our life, we need to go back and see, is there a perversion in my life with regard to God's word? Am I on track with God, or am I going against him? Am I full of arrogance and pride and self-sufficiency? Or is there humility from the previous verse, humility and the fear of God? If we are conducting ourselves and just say, I'm just going through this world and I'm trying to get what's right or what I want, and we don't have the fear of the Lord or this humility to our life, or if he's given us that direction and we're going another way, we're perverting it in some way, we're contrary to the ways of the Lord, the things of the Lord, then we're going to have problems. And usually when you have problems, you'll continue to have problems because you'll continue to be perverse or contrary to the Lord in that, and you'll try to find another way to get through that obstacle. Okay, so verse 6, popular verse, very well-known verse. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So the word train up, or that phrase train up, literally means to narrow the way, or it also means to dedicate. So when we have baby dedications, this is saying we as parents are going to dedicate this child. We're sanctifying him, we're setting him apart, we're making the way very narrow. Yes, we have the whole world around us as an avenue, but we're going to take our children and we are going to give them a very narrow way, a narrow way which leads to righteousness. And as parents, if we do that, and if we do that from a young age, then when they're old, they'll not depart from it. But a lot of times we have the attitude of, well, I just want my child to experience the world, so we send them into situations that they may not be ready for, or that just is very worldly. You can even see that in a later sense when people are saying, well, you know what, I went to college, I was in a fraternity or a sorority, and it was a good experience. I met my ex-husband or ex-wife there, all of that. And so as a result, we expose them. Instead of narrowing that way, we expose them to all of these things, and then they just get caught up in the world. So train up, narrow the way, dedicate your child to the Lord in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they'll not depart from it. Pretty straightforward, but it really comes down to parents. We need to have that commitment. Even grandparents, we come alongside the parents, and where we have that commitment to try to stay on the narrow path of the Lord, and to continue to talk about those things. And when other things that come up having to do with the world and fear and things that are opposite of righteousness, that we call that out and we bring them back in. So it goes on. The rich rules over the poor, verse 7, and the borrower is servant to the lender. This is one that is prevalent here. The rich rules over the poor. Now, currently, we need to understand where some of the politics are in this, and I won't go into it too much, but some of the present politics of progressivism is coming at us from the foundation of Darwinism, not from the foundation of Newton, who believed that God was the creator and that science worked the way it did because of what he did, and we're observing these things and we see that we're fearfully, wonderfully made, and that the world is part of the creation. Darwin is coming from a different standpoint, which basically says that it's survival of the fittest. He's fundamentally atheist, and that we're all supposed to be gathering together for the common good. And it's very different. So why do I bring this up? Because currently in our country and in our politics, and really all throughout the world now, there's this attitude that the rich rules over the poor, and that the rich person is bad and evil, and that the poor is just poor, and that they just ended up this way and the rich person ended up that way. And regardless of how that works together, there's no equalization of that wealth that can, it just doesn't really happen that way. But this is what's interesting about the further part of this verse, is that a lot of riches and poverty come about because of decisions that we've made. Now, I know that we live in the United States where the 5% of the world's population, and we are absolutely and totally wealthy. We have servants working for us. We have people working for us all the time. If you have a problem with, something in your house, you call the people to come out and work on it. And, we don't have people that have to go out and get water for us. We hire that, and it's plumbed in now. So we don't have, it's different, but we don't have what it was before, where you had rich people and then you had servants. But now we are so rich that we can hire out these services. But looking at this verse again, where it says the rich rules over the poor and the borrower is servant, or literally the borrower is slave to the lender, that we were born in this country free, and yet we are the most enslaved country in the whole world because of because of indebtedness, things that we've willingly chosen to go into. Now, there are certain things like our gas and electric and our water bills, and if we have trash pickup or property taxes or things along that line, rent, that we make an agreement and we sort of float it on a monthly basis, and we borrow time, or we borrow that service for a month, and then we pay for it at the end of the month. And so to just absolutely say that all borrowing and all debt is bad, or that we should never go into it, we do go into it. I mean, we live our lives that way in the country, but it comes down to what turns into excessiveness and the things that we want that end up putting us into incredible debt. You can listen to some of the radio shows and you hear of people that have gone to college and they've got $300,000-$400,000 worth of student loan debt. It's just insane numbers. They are enslaved by choice. They've elected to put themselves in that. And so as they have, then if we buy a house, we are electing to go into slavery. And we need to get out of slavery as quickly as possible, because when we are, then we're free to go and to do what God is calling us to do with respect to the ministry. When we're saddled with these things, then it hinders what the ministry is that God may be calling us into. So a borrower is slave to the lender. The rich rules over the poor. Verse 8, he who sows iniquity will reap sorrow, and the rod of his anger will fail. So let me read that again. He who sows iniquity, sows sin, will reap sorrow, and the rod of his anger will fail. I just think of Wile E. Coyote with all of the endeavors that he's trying to make against the Roadrunner. This is what it's all about. It comes to failure. He tries to sow iniquity. It reaps sorrow. He misses it, and usually he ends up getting hurt in the process himself, as we've seen in that cartoon. And the rod of his anger, it fails. Everything that he endeavors and tries to do falls by the wayside in failure. He who has a generous eye will be blessed, for he gives of his bread to the poor. So, simply looking at verse 9, I think he's just looking for ways and opportunities to give. So, someone who's generous will be blessed. Someone who has a generous eye, someone who's looking for needs and looking for people that he can bless and serve and minister to, that the Lord blesses him. And it's an awesome thing, but it starts with, with his attitude there, or his generous eye. He's looking to give. As opposed to most people, that's what the whole idea of, an evil eye is. It's something that is taken, and it's selfish, and it's kind of protective, and it's stingy, miserly, which I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, that the root word of misery is miser. So at least in the English, that they have that tie-in with one another. So we should have a generous eye. We should have that, because God has had a generous eye upon us. He's looked at us and said, I want them to be saved. I'm going to send my son so that they would believe and trust, and whosoever would believe wouldn't perish but have everlasting life. He looks upon us with generosity. So let's see, what else? Verse 10, cast out the scoffer, and contention will leave. Yes, strife and reproach will cease. I think of the person when we should all be able to relate to this, when we were younger perhaps, and you might have wanted to play on a team, or you were playing outside, and you always had that person that was complaining and scoffing and was just a troublemaker. And it's interesting how when that person is not part of it, whether they're kicked off the team or whether they, break their leg or something and they're not able to play anymore, how much more peaceful it is to be able to just be together and have that time together. And here, cast off the scoffer, contention will leave. yes, strife and reproach will cease. I remember a particular pastor's conference, somebody asked Pastor Chuck, said, how do you handle people that are just contrary to the ministry, contrary to what's going on? And Pastor Chuck quoted this verse 10, cast off the scoffer, contention will leave. So it's like the idea of a blessed subtraction. And in fact, you'll see that or hear that within ministry circles where, there was this person, we had a larger church, but we had a lot of people that were really contentious. So it was a blessed subtraction for them to leave. And everybody now is at peace. The flock is happy. There's not, backbiting and those types of things that are going on. Verse 11, he who loves purity of heart and has grace on his lips, the king will be his friend. Simply put, I think that people who have that have a pure heart and they love to have a pure heart, in other words, no deceit, no wickedness, no contrariness, no strife, and then has grace on their lips. Grace, they're favorable, that when they talk to people, you sense the grace of God. There's grace there, not condemnation, not accusation, but just grace. That when that's happening, that everybody wants to have that around them. A king wants them as advisors, not because they're going to be yes men, but because they're going to be true advisors. They're going to represent those things which are right. So again, he who loves purity of heart, he who loves to have a pure heart and has grace on his lips, the king will be his friends. Now, this is an important thing if we're in positions where we have a CEO or a vice president that we're accountable to, or if we're pure, if we're right, then we'll be a blessing to them and we'll be a help to them in what their work is, what their ministry is. If it has to do with the church or something along that line, it'll be a blessing. So moving on from there, verse 12, the eyes of the Lord preserve knowledge, but he overthrows the words of the faithless. So in other words, I kind of think of, we just need to trust God. So the eyes of the Lord preserve knowledge, but he overthrows the words of the faithless. Simply, I just believe that this comes down to the fact that he's our defense, and we need to not be moved. He'll preserve us. He's preserving this knowledge, and those who are faithless or contrary, he's going to overthrow that. And we can just trust in him in that. We may hear about something, a lie. It could be at church, it could be at work, it could be in our family, something that's going on. And instead of something that you see on Facebook, something that you see on Instagram, some dumb comment that somebody makes, we can just rest and know God's going to overthrow that. He's going to preserve knowledge. He's going to preserve those things which are true, and the nonsense, the garbage, the words, the faithless words, he'll just overthrow them. He'll let the truth happen and be known. Verse 13, awesome. The lazy man says, there's a lion outside, I shall be slain in the street. So I was going to come up with something for this, but I didn't want to. I was kind of too lazy. No, I'm kidding, of course. The lazy man says that there's a lion out there in the streets. So the lazy man is always going to have an excuse for not doing what he needs to do. There may not be a lion out in the streets, but he might be concerned that there's a lion, so he's not going to go out there and mow his lawn because he's afraid that he's going to make an excuse. There could be a lion out there. And this is the key here, is that if you're lazy, then you're always going to have an excuse. And so the question is how many excuses do you have for not doing what you need to be doing? How many excuses? How often do we have an excuse for not being faithful to our kids, not being faithful to our wife, or faithful at work, or showing up on time at work, or even being at church? So I'm talking to people that are at church, even online here. So you made it. You don't have to have an excuse. But think of the people that didn't make it to church. And I'm sure that they've got an excuse. I stayed up too late. I had to work. I had to um, change a diaper. I had, we had a blowout on the diaper, or something happened. There's always an excuse. And the question is, how many excuses do we have? And I believe that comes down to whether we could have what we see here in a good name, someone who's lazy, or somebody that's diligent, somebody that's on it, or somebody that is always coming up with a reason why they can't follow through. And it just comes down to faithfulness and not going that route. And they'll even say, "Man, I can't make it. There's a lie. Something bad could happen. So I could get killed." People, I could die going to church. That's a lot of the problem that's going on. And it's just like, well, okay, that might be valid, but how many other excuses do we have? And are they lumped on top of each other? Or there's valid excuses. There's some that we just see that it's a habit where we're always saying something to prevent us from doing what God wants us to do. The mouth of an immoral woman is a deep pit. He who is abhorred by the Lord will fall there. So verse 14, the mouth of an immoral woman. So the seduction, the things that she's calling into, the promising words, which are really empty. It's a deep pit. And the implication here of it being a deep pit is that it's specifically something that you fall into and you can't get out of. Now, I happen to see today on my computer, I got a new screen, and they're in England. They have this one particular, it's different from a pit, but basically it's this water, they built this within a lake so that when the lake got too big, it would actually fall into this like funnel into this pit. And I'm thinking that is horrible, because if you were in the water when it was too full, you would get sucked down into this funnel and there was no way to get out. I mean, we're talking about something that's probably 150 feet in diameter and it goes down. That's how they drain their lake out. And I'm thinking that is just the most dangerous thing in the world, swimming around. But it's the idea that you end up in something like that and you just drown. There's no getting out, and you lose your life trying to get out. But it starts with hearing or listening to the words of an immoral woman. And the thing that's important for us to see is the second part where it says, he who is abhorred by the Lord will fall there. Literally, that means to foam at the mouth. Somebody that's abhorred by the Lord, somebody that's foaming at the mouth, somebody who's disgusting, that's detestable, that's hated as a result of that. That's somebody that's abhorred. That's how God sees someone that is going in that direction. So what this is saying is that if you're somebody that is immoral or going to go after an immoral woman, and you do things that are abhorred, then the Lord is not going to prevent that. If that's what your heart is, then if it's perverse, then he will allow the perversion to continue, even to the degree of loss of life, because it's just contrary to him. It goes back around to the idea of having an attitude or a heart which is contrary or perverse from the Lord. So verse 15, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of correction will drive it far from him. Now, this is a verse that's been used, and it's used a lot in Christian circles having to do with child rearing, and it really emphasizes the idea of the rod. And it's important for us to look at what the meaning of the rod is. Literally, it's a stick. It could be a scepter. It could be something that's shorter. Generally, it was shorter. And it can also be a staff that isn't crooked, but is, it's shorter, but it's a staff. It could be literally it's used in connotation with the staff that Moses had. The point being is that it's a sign of authority first. And so it says foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. Let's start there. Let's start in the first half. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. Foolishness. The Lord, I'm sorry, the foolish man has said in his heart, there is no God. Or the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. That foolishness or simpleness or godlessness is something that children are not born with, or they're not born with godliness. They're born with simplicity and foolishness. They need to be disciplined, and they need to have that narrow way. They need to be directed toward the Lord. It doesn't just happen. It needs to be directed. And so if we know that foolishness is bound in the heart of the child, in other words, it's tied up there, it's bound. It's almost like it prevents the heart from living and breathing. It's suffocating it, keeping it from pumping. That by discipline and by introduction back to the Lord's ways, then there's life. It allows it to life. It's not constricted. And so if we know that as the premise, then it says the rod of correction will drive it far from him. So literally the rod, which is shebet, is in the Hebrew, it means to branch out. So it speaks in terms of a branch or a stick, an actual wooden, implement. But then it has multiple references throughout the Bible. The first is that it's a symbol of authority, and it's used as a scepter. And then secondly, it's to steer and bring some correction. And then the third is to be, switched for discipline, like switched or hit for discipline. And then lastly, it's used as an actual source of, corporal punishment for criminal behavior. So many parents look at this verse and they think that they just need to, take the rod and beat the child into submission until they come to the conclusion that what they've done is wrong. And yet, as we look at these four avenues, first of all, we need to know that the children need to know that this is a consequence, but that, like for instance, in Psalm 23, your rod and your staff, they comfort me, that those are things that are brought to bring correction. And so when you're going off course, it's not that you go to the sheep and you beat the tar out of the sheep to get them in, you coax them in. And if they continue to go in a foolish way or in a wrong way, then you might have to hit them a little bit harder. And this is what the whole idea of spankings are, that when we give a spanking, we don't go to the back of a child and just start, unloading on them. That we're first trying to discipline them and take them in the narrow way. And it can elevate, but really the full elevation of being beaten with the rod comes down to criminal punishment, is what we see throughout the Bible. Otherwise, it's supposed to be something that comforts. It's bringing us on track. It's keeping us narrow. It's keeping us in line. And sadly, I've seen a lot of situations where parents have really abused their kids. So we need to be careful with the understanding of that. So verse 16, he who oppresses the poor to increase riches, and he who gives to the rich will surely come to poverty. So first of all, there's two paths of worldly riches: oppressing the poor, and then he who gives to the rich will, surely come to poverty. In other words, it's almost like lining the pockets of the people that are already rich, giving to the rich, and he who oppresses the poor. So this is not quite Robin Hood and his merry men robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. It's just the opposite. They're robbing from the poor and giving to the rich. And so that, why? So that they will become elevated in the sight of other people. And so again, it all comes to poverty. Will surely come to poverty. So we need to know that what we hear about, even in the news, having to do with the inner city crime and so on, is that it's poor people robbing from other people that are poor. It's insane. Now, I'm not advocating that these poor people should be robbing from rich people, but it's just saying that it's going to end in poverty. It's not going to end well. And he who gives to the rich. So if you have this and you're trying to line the pockets of other people, it's not going to work out for you either. Okay, so it makes a shift here in verse 17 where the cadence is just a little bit different as far as how it reads through, and we need to wrap up here. So verse 17, incline your ear and hear the words of the wise and apply your heart to my knowledge. So there's some words to underline here. Incline your ear and hear the words. So it's like really pay attention, draw close, and listen to the words of the wise. Apply your heart to my understanding. So it's implying that there's a discipler here, and of course the discipler here is the Holy Spirit working through Solomon as this is coming down. Incline, apply, keep these things within you. It says in verse 17, for it's a pleasant thing if you keep them within you, let them all be fixed upon your lips, so that your trust may be in the Lord. So this comes back around to the prudence that, if we see evil coming, then we need to trust in the Lord. And if he gives us the money to go ahead and get an insurance policy, so be it. But the bottom line is that we trust in the Lord. You may not have the money for an insurance policy. You may not have the money to set up certain defenses for those calamities, but here it is. Just place your trust in the Lord. And I've instructed you today, even you, and I like how that says that in verse 19. That's saying even you. So I'm going to look into the camera, even you. It's talking to all of us. It isn't just talking to, this is written to a particular person back, 3,000 years ago, so it only has application. No, it's talking to us. I think that the Holy Spirit put that even you in there to emphasize, yes, he was talking to somebody, but he was at that time, but it's broad. He's trying to unlock this for all of us, for us to know that even you need to do this. So verse 20, have I not written to you excellent things of counsels and knowledge? Verse 21, that I may make you know the certainty of the words of truth. So all of these things are written, and the whole of the book of Proverbs, and the whole of the Old Testament, and the whole of the New Testament, and the whole counsel of God, Old Testament and New Testament. These things have been written for us that we would know the certainty of the words of truth, that you may answer words of truth to those who send to you. So this is so that we're ready. We're not, it isn't just for our life, but there's an evangelical aspect of this. Do not rob the poor because he's poor, nor oppress the afflicted at the gate, for the Lord will plead their cause and plunder the soul of those who plunder them. So people who are taking advantage and they see the opportunity to take something from someone else, don't do it, because God will specifically, he'll plunder them. So it's almost like you go and you steal and you take advantage of people and you get this, and money, you get all this stuff. But if you do it in a way where specifically you're robbing from other people, specifically because you have the opportunity. So widows, elderly people, children, it's easy prey, right? This kid has a $10 bill or something like that they got for their birthday or for Christmas. That's easy prey to get that $10 out of them. Same thing with elderly people. They're easy prey. And this is why they are prey for so many crooks and so on. But we don't need to be doing that. We need to be very careful to not take from somebody, period, but especially those who are in that state that are poor. Reminds me of the parable that Nathan gave to David when he was telling him and rebuking him for the sin against Bathsheba, and how she was likened to this sheep or this lamb that was precious to this man. And the king, on the other hand, this rich man, had all these sheep and all these lambs and could have any of them, and how he took that in the parable, in the story, and took it and sacrificed it instead of taking from what his own resources were. So, verse 24, make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man do not go, lest you learn his ways and set a snare for your soul. No friendship with an angry man. If you see somebody that is just basically a hothead, then be careful, because that will carry over into your mode of operation. In fact, if you're friends with them and they're hot like that, then you may have a confrontation with them where you need to be angry back, or you'll just learn that and then you'll then turn into the contentious hothead person to other people that you can get away with it. So just think of someone that's domineering and they're that way to you. You can face that head on, but more than likely you won't. You'll just become domineering to other people instead. So no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man do not go, lest you learn his ways and set a snare for your soul. So instead of us being gentle, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, instead of being a person of the fruit of the Spirit, then we begin to be a person of the, carnality, of the ways of the flesh, the deeds of the flesh. So don't go there. If that's someone that you're hanging around with, quit hanging around with them. Do not be one of those who shakes hands in a pledge, one of those who is surety for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should he take away your bed from under you? So, in other words, don't co-sign for things. And if somebody comes to you and says, yeah, I want to buy a car or a house or whatever things we buy, boats, and they said, I tried to get this with the bank, but the bank wouldn't finance me, so unless I have a co-signer, basically you're the one that's saying you're going to pay it. Well, if the bank is in the business of money and loans, if they don't see that that person is secure enough for that loan, why in the world are you going to co-sign it? Why are you going to do that? In other words, if you have the money, just pay it so they don't need the loan. And don't do a loan for them, give it to them. Just give it to them. But if they need to take it out for a loan, don't do it. And specifically, it's being said here, don't shake hands in a pledge. One of those who's surety for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, in other words, if you can't pay it yourself right now for that person, if you can't just give it to them, then don't do it at all. If they want a loan from the bank, if they want to go into slavery for a car, which it's looking at cars, you walk through some of these large warehouse places like Costco, Sam's Club, you walk through those and they have cars there. And you say, wow, that's a nice looking car. Look at that truck. That's really nice. And then you find out that this truck is $85,000 for that truck. And people are becoming enslaved to that. Some people have the money. Some people are millionaires. And so for them to pay $80,000, $85,000, actually that's a little high for a millionaire. That's 1/10 of their income. But they'll just pay it out cash. And then in 3 years, it'll be worth about $30,000. And then in 3 more years, it'll be worth about $7,000. So it's just, you've got to have that cash. But don't shake hands in a pledge for someone that's trying to buy something. If you don't have the money to pay for it directly, don't do it. Otherwise, when it's foreclosed against, if you don't have the money, they'll come and take things that are dear to you, like your bed, like places where you sleep. Or even if they don't literally take your bed, it's going to become something that's going to remove sleep from you. You're going to have that level of anxiety and concern. Do not remove the ancient landmarks which your fathers have set. So just quickly, don't despise the experiences of previous generations. When they place those landmarks there, they're placing those things there as a remembrance of the experience that took place. People were crossing into the Jordan. They built up these mounds, these stones, as a remembrance that we did this. And not to despise that or look upon that and just say, whatever, that's them. This is now. But to look at those and know that they're not that different. Things that have happened years ago still have application to us. History repeats itself if we miss it, or we can, avoid certain calamities that would come if we just look at the experiences of our forefathers, people that came before us, and not get so arrogant and prideful to think, oh, well, those people were shallow and not very smart, or they didn't have the whole picture, or whatever. And what we end up finding out, if we're smart, is that they actually did have a lot of foresight in placing those markers there and setting those things up. This is what we're seeing with our Constitution right now, with progressive people that want to change it for again, this Darwinistic idea of hey, all of this, it needs to work together for everybody to have an equal say and everything to be okay for everyone. And it sounds good, but it's a survival of the fittest mindset. And I guess I don't have time to explain that right now, but it's just to just abolish things like the Constitution and try to rewrite it in the Electoral College and all these other things that were placed there because they understood the value of it, not to just knock it down and say, who needs it? Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He shall not stand before unknown men. And this is one of those things for us to just look at, to be excellent in our work, The things that we do, we're not like the lazy man. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to do that. There's always excuses. No, instead, to be excellent in our work, to be craftsmen with respect to the things that we do and the things that we're involved in, building and helping with and serving, to have excellence. When we try to serve somebody else, that we do it in an excellent way. We don't just slop food in front of someone and say, hey, go ahead and eat that and be done with it, but that we serve it in an excellent way and in a manner which is pleasing to them and ministers to them and isn't just, an afterthought for us. If we do that, then I believe that we'll stand before those who will acknowledge that. And I think ultimately that's where we hear, well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of the Lord. We'll stand before the King, but we'll stand before other people who appreciate good good labor, good work with integrity. And with that, we basically come back all the way around to a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. What are we placing our trust in? What do we choose? What are we endeavoring for? So let's go the way of the good name.